Well, there's been some concern that private schools are asking parents to sign COVID-19 indemnity forms as pupils are phased back into schools. This would also mean that those schools are not held liable should children fall ill. We're joined by Lebogang Montjane. He's the Executive Director of the Independent Schools Association of Southern Africa. Lebogang, why are your schools asking parents to sign these forms?
Good evening, Cathy, and to your listeners. Not all independent schools are requiring parents to pay to sign these indemnity clauses. It is important for us to also remember that all parents, generally, if they have signed a contract with independent schools, have already signed an indemnity provision contained in that contract.
So then that should suffice. Why is there a different one that is specific to COVID-19?
It is not unusual for independent schools, both as a practice, that, for example, if the children are going on a camp or the children are going on some form of trip, to ask parents to additionally sign another indemnity clause. So this is really for those schools who are feeling that this is an opportunity for them to highlight the joint responsibility.
Yeah, but surely going on a trip is very different to being in a situation where there's a global pandemic at play. This is unprecedented water, so I don't think you're comparing apples with apples here.
No, I fully agree with you, and that's exactly what I'm saying. It is dealing with they're actually focusing on the fact that we're dealing with something that is quite unprecedented. And because we're dealing with an unprecedented, they're highlighting the fact that there is a risk. However, I must also highlight that the risk to children of what we know of the COVID-19 epidemic at this particular point is quite minimal. It does not affect children as much as it affects parents.
What is the purpose of this form? What are schools trying to achieve by it?
I think they're trying to highlight, as I've said, they're trying to highlight the fact that COVID-19 is an uncertain time. I mean, as you noted now, we're talking about a global pandemic. I have not lived through a global pandemic, and I don't think that most of us have. And because of the manner on which this pandemic is, parents are just, these contracts are there to simply highlight that we have joint responsibilities of both of us. But more importantly here, an indemnity clause does not dislodge of any negligence. If a school has been negligent and is not, for example, I'm seeing now testing, cleaning, and a child does end up having COVID-19, under those circumstances, the school would be found to be liable.
Unfortunately, you don't seem to have the support of individuals, including the Western Cape's MEC of Education, who's given an instruction to parents in that province simply not to sign any of these forms, because unfortunately what it has done is that it's also added fear to parents who are already anxious about the fact that their children must go back to school.
Yeah, can I just go back to my previous point? Not every school is asking parents to sign an additional indemnity clause. And actually, interestingly enough, some schools have said, we've already have an indemnity under the normal parent contract, so we will not use these indemnity contracts. However, those schools who have elected to do so have done so on their own fruition. It's not a mandatory, and let me emphasize that. It's not mandatory. It is a bilateral agreement. If parents are feeling uncomfortable about these clauses, please contact your school and engage your school to state.
Are you advising those schools that are part of your organization to scrap these indemnity forms?
We are, as you correctly say, we're an association. We are not a legislative body. We only advise schools on what they need to do. So obviously, if a school feels that, that is what they have taken from their legal advisors. From our perspective, if you have already signed that indemnity clause within a usual contract, there is no necessity for you to sign another indemnity. But also, as I must emphasize, can I again do so, is this. Signing an indemnity does not dislodge the school of the duty of care. If the school is negligent and does not follow the standard operating procedures as set out by the Department of Basic Education, they will be liable. And I think that I must emphasize that.
All right.
Even if they've signed the contract, it does not mean in any way that if the school has been negligent and your child gets COVID-19, they will be found liable by a court of law.